The Lady with the Lamp, the second part. While she was resting, there suddenly burst upon Europe the terrible Crimean War, in which Russia on one side and England, France and Turkey on the other, fought. England sent her fleet and her army down through the Mediterranean and Black Seas to the Crimea, and there terrible battles were fought, like that charge at Balaclava of the Light Brigade. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. The word came to England that though the French army had its nurses and sisters of mercy, the English wounded were neglected and were dying by the thousands. Queen Victoria and all England called for nurses, but alas, who were there? They looked around, and while they saw many gentlewomen who were willing, few were there who were trained. But one stood above them all, and that one was Florence Nightingale. Her work was known at court, and she was sent for. The letter from the government calling her crossed in the mails a letter of her own to the government offering to go. And shorty Florence Nightingale was busiest of all the women in England, selecting nurses, gathering supplies, making arrangements for sailing. Her health seemed to spring up to meet the need. She had a great cause, and she could not afford to be sick. She gathered 38 nurses, whom the English people named the Angel Band, and at last, with a shipload of supplies, they sailed for the seat of war. Shortly before they arrived, a terrible battle had been fought, and the wounded men were being brought in and laid on the floors or anywhere, for there were no more beds for them, neither was there anything fit for them to eat, nor enough doctors to attend to their wounds. But Florence Nightingale, with her nurses, took hold and cleaned up the dirty place, and fixed beds with clean linen, and washed the wounded dirty soldiers, and dressed their wounds. She had brought her own cooks along too, and with them she established a model kitchen where good and palatable food for the sick was prepared. And this alone was a wonderful boon, for there had been no proper food before, and no order in the eating. They who were least wounded and ill could seize the food, and they who were most sick went without. There were many thousands of wounded soldiers in the hospitals, and 40 out of every 100 died before Florence Nightingale came. But when she had changed things around, only 2 out of 100 died. At first she was called the Lady in Chief, but after she had been there a while, the soldiers in the hospitals began to call her by another name, the Lady with the Lamp. Do you know why? I will tell you. All day long Florence Nightingale would be busy nursing the sick, feeding the hungry, writing letters for the wounded, and showing hundreds of her helpers how to do the things that needed to be done. And when night came she would be very tired. Yet late at night, after nearly everybody had stopped the day's work, after the soldiers who could sleep were still, after the doctors had gone and almost all the nurses, then down through the wards, with their thousands of cots, miles upon miles of them, down the aisle, would come a lady with a lamp. It was Florence Nightingale, come to see, the last thing in the night, that all her soldier boys were cared for. And here and there would be some poor, sick, wounded soldier who could not sleep, but tossed and moaned in pain. And the lady with the lamp would stop and give him a drink, or change his bandages, or rub his head and soothe his pain. Or perhaps, if he was dying, she would write for him his last words to his loved ones at home, and stay with him until his eyes closed in their last long slumber. And so, night after night, the soldiers looked to see come through their halls the lady with the lamp, and as she passed they would turn their heads to kiss her shadow as it fell upon their pillows, for to them she seemed like an angel from heaven. At last the war was ended, and the dead were buried, and the wounded became well, and the hospitals were emptied. And then, when the last of the men had been sent home, Florence Nightingale came back to England to rest. She had worn herself out in the long, long trial, and she was never more to be well, though she lived to be 90 years old. But deep in the hearts of the soldiers, deep in the hearts of the English people, and deep in the hearts of all the world, forever will be loved Florence Nightingale, the Lady with the Lamp. Lo, in that house of misery, a lady with a lamp I see, pass through the glimmering gloom, and flit from room to room. And slow, as in a dream of bliss, the speechless sufferer turns to kiss her shadow as it falls upon the darkening walls. On England's annals through the long hereafter of her speech and song, that light its rays shall cast from portals of the past. A lady with a lamp shall stand in the great history of the land, a noble type of good, heroic womanhood. By Longfellow. So arise and to the task. Ask God to give you words that all can understand. Always remember that you are not alone in doing the work of God. The Lord God, He is your strength.